Good morning, everyone. All right, so you know how at the beginning of a flight, when you're taking an airplane somewhere, the flight attendants go over protocol and tell you how to put your seatbelt on and how to use the oxygen mask and that whole thing? We're going to do that for a moment. I want to just make sure you guys are set up for success as we go into some of the things we're going to talk about today. Some of you in the room might feel, and I don't know if that's unique to this experience or if you just do this in any kind of event you go to, but some of you might feel like you need to get the stuff. And so you're going to hustle and grind and make sure that you write down every note and every word. And oh my God, I need to get everything I can get out of this moment, out of this experience. And I just want you to pay attention to the energy of that posture. I would like to release you guys from needing to take down every note and capture every word and understand every line. Like you're gonna be okay. I guess I want to say to that. That spirit is not going to help you. That spirit doesn't help you learn. It doesn't help you retain. It doesn't help you take ground or grow. So that frantic thing of I need to capture everything, or I didn't get that, or can you repeat that? I'm not saying don't value the content. I'm saying don't value it in that way. Don't let yourself be motivated by anxiety and franticness and frenetic panic. Not helpful, right? And you outwardly might look fine, but inwardly, if that's the storm inside of you, I would like to invite you to let go of that. That's not the Holy Spirit. He doesn't move in that way, okay? So for those of you who you're like, oh God, that's me. Me saying this to you just makes it worse. I'm just kidding. I want you just to recognize, just catch that it's there. If you can admit that that's happening, then you'll actually experience a separation from it. If you refuse to acknowledge that, then it will continue to govern your experience. What I'd like for you to do is to be able to just acknowledge that and disassociate from it. That's not who you are. It's not you, okay? You, the natural you, those of you who have been born again, who met Jesus and got remade, you're a new creation, you are not naturally anxious. It's not what you're like. It's not who you are. You know what I mean? Like you are a peaceful being. You are at rest. You are playful and curious and excited and hopeful and anticipatory. You are not stressed out. You are not easily offended. You are not a control freak. That is not who you are. Jesus killed that person. Like that person doesn't exist. Okay, so I want to take a moment and just talk about what you are. You are liberated from the striving struggle that most of humanity has to walk through. They don't have any other portion that is their lot. That's the best they can come up with, is stressed out and controlling to try and guarantee results because they have to fend for themselves as orphans, groping around in the dark. That's not you. You have been adopted. You have been grafted in. You have been remade. So I want you guys to embrace the permission to chill out. To be the hopeful, restful, peaceful son/daughter that you already are. You don't need to make that happen. You don't need to climb your way into it. That's already true, and the only thing you need to do is admit it. That's the awkward thing of the gospel. Jesus finished it, everything. It's all done. There's nothing left for you to have to do. So your part to play, the work of the Lord is this, to believe on the one he sent. Because that's, the joke in that is it's not work. Jesus is like, you ready for your task? You ready to play your part? Okay, your part is believe. And then the controlling, fearful, anxiety, crazy people took believe and turned it into this striving performance nightmare and just called it belief when actually it's anxiety and control and paranoia and fear and whatever. Not that, okay? Your job is to simply allow Jesus to be who he is, even if it scares you. Jesus is brave. Jesus is honest. Jesus is curious. Do you guys realize that God asks the most questions? Yeah. And he's the one who knows everything? So if the guy who knows everything is asking the most questions, we would probably do well to follow suit. And he's not asking because he needs to know. He's asking because he's curious, because he's fascinated. So I just want to speak to your nature and affirm that you're like him in that way. All right? So we're going to get into some mechanics because I know that we have relationships with people who aren't necessarily in that place, who don't understand that, who haven't embraced that state. And we have to have a relationship with these people. We have to have conversations. We have to share atmospheres, right? We have to work together with these people. So I want to talk today about, is this, maybe? I think I have a verse I want us to read. All right. 2 Thessalonians, for the secret power of lawlessness is already at work. And I cut some stuff out. All the ways that wickedness deceives those who are perishing. They perish because they refused to love the truth and so be saved. Now, I know nobody in this room does that, but people in the world suffer. They're subject to lawlessness and depravity and wickedness because, catch the little secret sauce here, the reason they're subject to chaos and decay is because they refused to love the truth. What does that look like? The truth comes with consequences, right? The truth comes with standards. The truth expects you to be brave and honest. The truth doesn't accept anything else. The Lord is gracious and kind, but he doesn't change. And one of the most difficult things in my journey of learning how to walk with the Lord was learning how to love the truth. I wanted to, for sure, but man, I had some practices and beliefs and habits that I had to let go of in order to rightly relate to him. And that was difficult for a little bit there. Because in order to align with the truth, I had to stop lying to people. Eye roll. So annoying. In order to align with the truth, I had to stop pretending. I had to stop trying to cater to what other people wanted. Which, that sucks. In order to rightly align with the truth, I had to stop being afraid of what people thought. I had to give up my ego, my agenda, my control that I wanted over a situation or a person or a relationship or whatever. I had to give up requiring those things in order to align with the truth. And that's not unique to me. That's every single one of our paths. Narrow is the road and difficult is the path that leads to life. And it's not because it's supposed to be hard. It's because we are so accustomed to something else. Wide is the road. Easy is the path that leads to destruction, and many go that way. It's the most common traveled path because it's the most affordable. It's the easiest. It's the cheapest. So, of course, the droves are going to go that way. It doesn't require much. To follow Jesus, we literally don't have the power to do it, and so we give up everything. We die. And sometimes we forget that was the cost. Oh yeah, I died. Jesus killed me. So that means I don't get to hold on to this thing anymore. That thing doesn't belong to me anymore. I don't need this from that person anymore. I'm not here anymore. So in that place, there's a reorienting that needs to happen. And the Lord leads and guides our souls to bend toward his nature, right? So that container that our spirit is in starts to shift. We start learning how to submit to the truth, how to love the truth. And when we do that, freedom is the result. We are liberated. Okay? And so when that's you guys, by the way. You might not have that experience in your soul. You might still have some things you've said yes to that you think make sense that are actually contrary to the Lord, and so then they produce results you don't like. They produce results that are complicated or less than fulfilling or less than fruitful. But as we say yes to the Lord, as we say yes to the truth in those innermost parts of our hearts, and we give him submission there, and we allow him to express himself as us, you start experiencing a transformation. You start seeing things come out of you that are profound, that are beautiful, that are kind, that are gentle, generous, benevolent. It starts coming out of you, and you're like, what is happening? I remember when I first started getting to know the Lord in this place, I would cry sometimes just seeing my own intentions coming out of my heart. It was evidence to me that God was doing something to me. I was like, I didn't used to be this person. I didn't used to be like this. And the same is true of you. I was just having an awakening. I was just realizing what had happened to me. It was crazy. It's beautiful. But the light started coming out. I was like, oh, it's nice. It feels so good. Okay. So today, we're going to talk about connection. All right? We're going to talk about connection. I'm using that word on purpose, and you'll see why in a little bit. We've got two characters to help us understand these dynamics. We've got Newman, and then we've got this other character I'd like to introduce to you guys. His name is Others. So Newman and Others are going to help us explore dynamics and understand mechanics between two people. Specifically, I want you guys to understand, I want to go after the mechanics in the spirit. Because between you and one other person, there's stuff happening in the invisible realm, underneath all this, that is where the voice and the exchange and the meaning and the intention come from. Okay, so if we can understand what's happening behind the scenes, we are way more equipped and empowered to intentionally respond in the natural. And that changes the results. All right? So we're going to get into that. I'm having trouble with this right now. Okay, so you see these lines? This equals connection, I'm calling that. In the spirit, I call that thing a connection. In the natural, people call that a relationship. Okay? So in the spirit, I'm calling it connection. In the natural, it's called relationship. I'm actually making a distinction on purpose. What you might associate as a relationship, the connection came first. And the connection might be different than what you would perceive of as a relationship. So the way I'm going to contrast that is, when I say the word relationship, some of you guys think, oh, that means history. That means I've built something with this person. That means I've chosen them in a certain way or whatever. And that's like true and right and good and beautiful in relationship, but you don't need that stuff to have a connection with somebody. Right? So I want you to understand there's a difference there. When it comes to connection in the spirit, you don't need time. You know what I mean? We're going to get into some mechanics, you guys. We want to understand about this differently. You're going to need the spirit of your mind to be renewed to understand some of this. I'm going to do my best to try and put this into language that makes sense, and I want you guys to be able to, let's try that in this session. Why don't you pop your hand up if you have a question for us to get into, if that's important. If I'm in the middle of something and I ignore you, don't take it personally. It means it's not a good time for me to stop. But I want to invite you, if you need to ask a question about the content, just to make sure you're understanding it, I want to invite you to feel free to pop your hand up. On questions, make sure your question is relevant to everyone in the room. So don't make it super unique and specific and exceptional and strange and esoteric to your life. Make sure it's relevant to everybody. If it's not, now is not the time to ask it, okay? Remember that I'm a person. So when you talk to me, please remember I've got a heart. I have emotions. I'm going to feel when you say things. So be kind and treat me like a person. I'm saying that because sometimes people just forget, and it's not because they're cruel. They just, they're so voracious for the content, they just forget there's a person they're talking to. I'm a person, all right? So just remember that. I feel like there's some other thing that I wanted to throw in there. Oh, thank you. Was that you? Okay, I was like, well, how do you know that? Thank you. Please refrain in the question time from telling stories or testimonies. It's not story time. So ask a question, keep it brief so we can keep moving, all right? So if you have a question, please follow those guidelines. All right. So, for example, just to give you some context for this, I had an intern a couple years ago who, for the first couple months in the internship, wasn't super engaging with the rest of the team. They didn't really participate much. They weren't opening very much. They weren't investing much in relationship. And at one point, we were at the grocery store getting some stuff, and we got to the parking lot, and I started feeling really sad out of nowhere, this deep, weird sadness. I was like, what is that? And I just pushed it away and ignored it. We got to the fruit section, and I started feeling sad again. I'm like, what is going on? And I just ignored it, and most of this is subconscious. I'm not, paying attention. And then by the time we got to the frozen aisle, it's in full-fledged. I'm like, oh, something's wrong. I shouldn't feel this way. This isn't me. Something's going on. And I'm like, oh, is it my intern? Is this something that she's going through? So in the car on the way to dinner, we were on the way to meet all the rest of the team. I was like, how you feeling right now? She's like, I feel good. I'm excited about tonight, whatever. I'm like, really? It's interesting. Yeah, I'm excited about tonight too. How's your family? I could feel this weird depth of longing and sadness and disconnection and isolation around this whole thing. So I'm like, how's your family doing? And she's like, I miss them. Yeah? And then she starts to cry. And you guys, the conversation is brief. She starts crying. I'm like, what's going on? I miss my family so much. I'm like, and the thing is, like, this sadness that she was feeling, there's a difference between someone going through, like, their own heart process and someone having emotion that's energized by evil. Those are two different things. And so when it comes to compassion and how you respond to someone, there's a difference to this. And sometimes, out of practice, people force themselves to be compassionate and empathetic toward evil spirits in someone's life, right? Because they're crying. So because they're crying, I owe them compassion, or I have to be covering in this moment. And that's actually not true. And I'm saying that with a caveat that you want to follow the Holy Spirit in this. I'm not saying don't care about people, obviously. But there's a difference between someone experiencing pain, like genuine pain from something that they're going through, versus the enemy capitalizing on their pain and turning it into something else. And people express that connection intensely, and they often don't know the difference. So discernment comes in to help you separate that, to be able to tell the distinction. Like, oh, this isn't awesome. And so in the car ride on the way to dinner, I could feel like there's stuff happening in this sadness that's evil. It's not truth. It's not genuinely her pain. She's being pushed by something, right? So I wasn't like, oh my God, you're okay? I'm so sorry. I'm so sad this is happening to you. That didn't happen. I was like, why do you think that is? Like, why do you miss your family so intensely? Because I could feel something's wrong. She's like, well, I just haven't seen them in a few months, and I'm really close to them. And at this point, all these lies are coming out. And what she's saying sounds sentimental, right? It sounds affectionate, and it sounds like honor and value, and it all sounds right and good in English. But the spirit of it was twisted and false, which is awkward, you know what I mean? And I'm used to this at this point, so I'm not like thrown off, but sometimes it can feel jarring or like there's a conflict when you hear someone saying things that you know you're supposed to feel a certain way about, and you don't have it. Why don't I care right now? Why don't I believe them? Why do I have zero interest in being part of this moment, right? And some of you guys feel self-conscious or guilty because you can't meet them there. And I'd like to propose to you, potentially, I'm not saying this is always the case, but maybe more often than not, potentially the reason you can't engage with them in that moment is because what's motivating them is Satan. And you are not equipped with compassion for the devil. You're not supposed to feel that for him. It's the enemy, okay? And so sometimes they don't know they're doing it, and so they're just releasing the nature of the dark side, and you have no compassion for that. The Lord has no compassion for evil. He loves his kids. He covers and supports and empowers them in their immaturity. He does not cover evil. Love can't do that. Love covers a multitude of sins, yes? The result of someone having been led astray and chosen darkness. He covers the results in their life. He meets them there. But the choice of partnering with evil, he doesn't touch. He's not part of that. Doesn't honor that. And so you must follow him in that way if you're going to be effective in your ability to minister to people in that space. You are not more compassionate than Jesus. So if he's not moving toward them in that way, you should not either. I'm not giving you permission not to care about people. I'm not giving you permission to bulldoze people and dismiss them and judge them. I'm saying discern the spirit of a thing. And that's going to take practice before you're going to get accurate. So what I did with my intern in that moment came from years of practice. I learned how to discern that as quickly and as readily and as presently as I was able to, but back in the day, I couldn't do it right then. I had to process it later and piece things together and pull things apart and dissect and share and, a bunch of that before I finally started catching it in the moment. So I'm not saying just go start dismissing everyone when you don't have compassion. Maybe you didn't get enough sleep last night. That could be the reason, right? Maybe you don't have compassion because you're not thinking about anybody else but yourself and you're only focused on your own agenda. I'm not talking about that, right? That's a different thing. But when you're present and you're moved by love and you prioritize connection with someone and they're releasing pain and there's evil present, or you don't feel the compassion, maybe it's because what's coming from them isn't them. Maybe that pain that's coming out isn't connected to an actual person. Okay, anyway, so my intern's just kind of releasing all this dark energy. Sounds weird. Flooding my car with, poison and smoke. And I'm like, she's like, oh. I'm like, why do you think that you feel so lonely? She's like, well, My family's they're the only ones who know me. I was like, whoa, who told you that? She's like, what do you mean? I was like, that's not true. She's like, yeah, it is. I was like, how do you know that? She's like, cause you guys have only known me for a couple months. I've only been around, you haven't heard my stories. You haven't lived with me in my life. You haven't spent a ton of time with me. I was like, that doesn't mean we don't know you. She's like, what? And this paradigm, this clash. And so that's what I'm talking about here. There were things about my intern that I knew because of the Spirit, right? We didn't have years of history and shared experience and all these stories that we swapped, but I'd like to propose to you, you don't actually need that stuff to have a connection with someone. And if you can regard and relate to them in that space appropriately, in the light, motivated by love and truth, then that connection has power, has weight, and you can build stuff today. You can meet someone today and build that when it's authentic and real. I'm not talking about manufacturing things or making things up. I'm talking about when it's actually in the Spirit, okay? When that's there, you don't need time. The spirit realm is outside of that whole mechanism, okay? So you don't need a bunch of history and whatever to build that. I'm not saying we rush into intimacy. I would say that there's wisdom in pacing yourself when it comes to unlocking your heart and letting people get into deep access and places of your soul. Like, I think it's wise to be intentional and to take your time in that stuff. So I'm not saying let's rush into it and be cavalier. What I am saying, though, is you don't need time to know people in that place. That's true, okay? So I understand this can get messy if you take it in one way and run hard at it. Don't do that. But when it comes to the spirit realm and the mechanics, that's true. You don't need time, okay? So when I talk about connection, most people call it relationship. That's where we're looking at the display of those exchanges and the meanings. But what I'm going to talk about is the connection, what's going on behind the scenes. So you can have a connection with the store clerk and with your mom and your best friend and your spouse. You have connections with all those people. The relationship is different, right? You have connection with any of them. Can we have a mic runner? Someone on my team run a mic? Mike, Zach? I don't have a microphone. It's over there. All right. Can you stand up and right here, Jake? Sorry, you've got two of them. It's great.
So I understand what you're saying, that you don't need deep history or that kind of chronological time with the person to know them by the Spirit. But I guess my question is, even with spiritual connection with people that are like in your inner circle or like, they're important to you, like for me, like quality time, I guess maybe it's two different topics, what you mean you don't need time. Like time to me is important for me to feel connected to those that are close to me.
In relationship.
In relationship. But also even if it's in the Spirit, for example, my friend across, the planet could be telling me, this is actually true, like, oh, I sent you a spiritual hello, or a spiritual something because I was just too wiped out to answer that day or whatever, And in a way, I get it. I got something in the Spirit, but I still needed an actual connection to, how do I say it? It's like, it's part of my love language. So it's like if I don't feel like that kind of time is given, then I feel some disconnect.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're talking about your soul.
Well, it's kind of both though, because it's like when we connect, we're sharing spiritual things, but it goes deeper when we're actually able to dialogue versus I'm just sending you something in the Spirit,
Yeah, listen,
Sorry.
the sending stuff in the Spirit, that's a whole different thing that I'm not getting into at this school. So that's a weird, exceptional, unique situation that I don't know that I want to teach on. But what you're describing when it comes to love languages, that's the soul rung. It doesn't not matter. It's beautiful and important, especially for the relationship aspect of this. It's not needed in the connection, in the Spirit. When your soul's interpreting what that means and what you want to do with it, you're in your interpretation, right? Of course, all those things are coming into play, and they do matter. But in the Spirit, there's a distinction. We're going to get into some different dynamics here. This is probably going in a direction that's not helpful right now, so maybe bring it up later, but the love language piece and what I need for people in exchange to feel known or whatever, valid, it's just soul. Not bad, not inferior, not wrong. Just there's something else going on in the spirit that needs to happen in order for that stuff to have a place. Go ahead. And I have many slides to get through, so I don't want to spend the whole session doing Q&A, but go ahead.
Okay, can you clarify when you said God doesn't meet people in their places where they've chosen evil? I got kind of lost in that little. You had a couple sentences. I know you weren't trying to be contradictory, and then I was like, but it didn't totally make sense. So when you say
maybe meet people is not the best way to say that. When someone is partnering with control or rejection or manipulation or whatever, the Lord is not like, oh, it's okay that that's happening. It's okay. He's not doing that. He's like, yeah, it's not appropriate. We're not touching that. And so as long as you're in bed with that thing and going after it, you've left the Lord and you're doing something else. He's not going to jump into that process with you and help you figure out how to be manipulative, right? So that's separate. He hasn't left you. He can't leave you. It won't happen. So some people think when they point apart with evil, God's gone. That's not true. He's with you in it. He's just not participating. So in order for us to walk with the Lord, we have to let go of whatever evil has occupied our soul. We have to let go of that, the repenting thing, right? Turn away from it, and then allow him to show us how to move forward. We follow his lead, right? We don't make up our version of how to not manipulate, and then God blesses it. We let go of manipulation, and then let the Lord show us how to move forward, right? We're followers. Does that make sense? Have I made the distinction that you're looking for? Okay, great. Okay, last one, then we're going to move on from this segment. Becky?
Real quick question. In the connection, you're talking spirit.
Yeah.
And is that spirit connection with spirit, is that believers to believer, or can it be are there connections with believers' spirit to unbelievers' spirit?
Yep, great question. Becky. Is your last name Lehman? What's your last name? Lehman, okay. I know you. That's awesome. Okay, I can't spend a ton of time on this. God, we could spend a whole session on this. We could spend a whole day on this subject. Someone who has not met Jesus, who has not been born again yet. Oh! You're not sorry. Okay, what I'm going to say, this is Mike's opinion, all right? I'm not teaching like doctrine or theology here. I'm going to tell you from my experience what I've learned and the notes that I've taken on this dynamic. And I want to say this lightly, so I'm not trying to like build walls here, okay? You're going to crucify me. Here's my version of that. And I'm not trying to be extreme. I'm going to be extreme for the sake of making a point. When it comes to unbelievers, how many of you guys have not seen The Matrix? How many of you have not seen the movie The Matrix? Okay. Most of you have. In the movie The Matrix, Morpheus offers Neo the red pill and the blue pill, right? If you take the blue pill, you wake up tomorrow and believe whatever you want to believe, right? He forgets the whole thing happened, maybe it's a dream. You take the red pill, I take you deeper down the rabbit hole, right? You start figuring out what's really going on. Neo takes the red pill, he wakes up in a nightmare. Only that's the real world, right? He wakes up realizing that the whole, world that he lived in and knew was a simulation. It wasn't real. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert. Fake. His whole life, everything he had experienced, came out 20 years ago. His whole life was a lie, right? It was a computer-generated simulation. He wasn't actually living a life. He was like a zombie in a pod. Unbelievers, from my experience, okay, you know what? This is the last question on this subject. We cannot spend this whole session on this because I know you guys are going to be like, unbelievers are still asleep. They have not taken the red pill. They have not woken up. So, I'm not saying you don't have a connection with them in the spirit. What I am saying, though, is they cannot give you things that someone who has woken up can. Like, it's not because they don't want to. They literally don't have it available. So it's actually really inappropriate to expect them to give you stuff when they're still dead, when they've not been reborn, when they're not remade, when they're not a new creation. It's inappropriate to expect intimacy from someone who can't go to the depths like you can. Inappropriate. So you actually set them up for failure when you try to build intimacy with someone who doesn't know Jesus. Okay? I'm not saying that to be condescending or diminishing. It's the state that they're in. They're dead. What they do, what they offer, what they produce, it's soul at best. They cannot give you life from the Spirit. Okay? So, yes, you'll experience stuff in the Spirit like we're about to get into, but when it comes to relationship, there's a way that you should go about navigating and governing that in light of what they are. Does that work for now? For now? Yes. All right. You guys. All right. That connection, let's do that again. This is the connection that Newman and others have, right? That connection exists apart from either one of them. So like Becky and Ruby, let's say they become friends, they have a relationship. Becky has a history with the Lord. Ruby has a history with the Lord. They both have a story that they're living out. When they meet and build something, when they connect in the Spirit, that connection has a thing about it, energy, crackling. This connection starts to become its own thing, if you will. It's not a living being. I'm not saying we've created a spirit, but in the connection, there's something that happens in the Spirit that didn't exist before and will never exist again. You guys, being two creative beings coming from the author of life, have created something. I'm going to call that a connection, and that connection actually starts to emit a frequency in the Spirit. Meaning, you can come up to a relationship, to a married couple or friends or whatever, and you can, a discerner, someone picking up stuff in the spirit realm, can pick up the nature of the connection. And it's not about one individual or the other, it's about what they built together, right? That thing gives off. And so there are times where you're around a couple or whatever, and you're like, ugh, can't be around this, right? And it's why? Because they're all mushy-gushy? It's like, not necessarily. Usually it's because what's coming out of the Spirit, there's ickiness in it, and you can feel it. And it's not from one person to the other. You can feel something from one person or the other, but oftentimes people are reacting to the connection. There's something about that connection that's emitting something that we don't like. Or maybe we're drawn to it. The person by themselves, it's like, it's okay, but when they're the thing they've built is like, I don't know, there's something about this I'm really drawn to. I'm amazed by, I'm inspired, whatever, okay? So my point in making this slide is I want to make this distinction that there's a connection that exists between two people that is releasing something. And also I want to throw this other giant disclaimer. So a lot of the things we're going to talk about in today's segment, I don't have scripture for you. So you're going to have to work this out with the Lord. And I'm telling you that up front, or as upfront as I can remember. Because I see a lot of this in Scripture, but most of this is coming from my experience in life, in the Spirit, in navigating these dynamics. When it comes to discernment, there are like 2 verses in the New Testament on discernment, and they're brief. And the definitions behind the words that are being used, not super helpful. So we don't have a ton of, there's not a ton of content in Scripture on these dynamics. But I find that there's stuff missing. And if we don't know this stuff, we read Scripture and then come to very strange, incomplete conclusions. So my goal is not to teach you guys things that are outside of the Bible. My goal is to try and fill in some gaps so you can rightly understand what's being explained in Scripture. Okay? Okay. Help me, what time am I supposed to be done? Okay, thank you. So that connection, crackling, producing energy, frequency, it's releasing spirit, if you will. That thing produces an aroma unto the Lord. It's worship, it's beautiful, it's fragrant, or it's repulsive. It's unclean, right? Depending on the nature of what we've both said yes to in the connection. Okay? And so you actually get to serve the Lord and minister to the Lord in the way that you do relationship, the way you connect, or you can do the other thing. And by and large, I'd like to propose in the BSSM environment, my team is super attractive to people because they see what the connection is between the people on my team. That thing between them is emitting something. There's purity. It's clean. You know what I mean? It's honest. It's in the light. It might not be perfect. Like, we have to discuss this stuff. People have to be confronted. We have to like work stuff out. It definitely happens. But it's done in the light. And so by and large, what's coming off of those connections is alive. It's inviting, it's empowering. People are drawn to it, right? And that's not something we're trying to do. It is a result of agreement, right? In the Spirit. Okay, so I just want you to understand this mechanic that there's a connection between you and every person you know. There's a connection. And I'm not telling you this to give you a bunch of laundry lists of things you have to now manage. It's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that stuff is established and it does produce. Okay? So those connections, crackling, firing off some frequency in the Spirit, okay? It's communicating to the world. All right. This makes me insecure. I'm putting these little lightning bolts above these guys. I'm calling these little lightning bolts interpretation. Okay? So you've got the connection between others and Newman, and then the little lightning bolt above them is Newman's interpretation and others' interpretation of that connection. Okay? So each person, each member on the either side of the connection has an interpretation of that connection. Meaning, I could have a friend here, and they can interpret our connection in a way that I don't interpret it. And I interpret it differently than they interpret it. The connection in and of itself functions independently of either of us. Let me say it again. I'm here. I have my end of the relationship. My friend's over here. My friend has their interpretation of our connection, and I have my interpretation of our connection, and they could be different. The connection itself operates independently of either of our interpretations. Okay? So if you think that what's real in the Spirit is based on your interpretation, you would end up in incorrect conclusions. That's not true. Your interpretation or your filter, actually I was going to do a session today called lenses. We're going to do that later. But your filter on how you interpret what's going on is not truth. It's your filter. And the more we submit our filter to the truth, the more accurate and in the light we will be, and the more profound and powerful our choices will be, right? So the interpretation thing I want to identify and like conceptualize so you can recognize just because you feel that way, just because you had that thought, just because you saw that thing, doesn't mean that's what it was. It means that's how you interpreted it. And the container that your spirit is sitting in, your soul, is where that interpretation is getting its information. Is getting its information. Okay? So I'm not trying to make this super complicated. I'm just telling you guys all these parts are working together, producing results in your life. It's beautiful. It's fascinating. I don't want to get out of our depth. I don't want you guys to just kind of glaze over and be like, okay, I can't do this. That's not my heart. But these things are happening. So if you can understand that you have an interpretation of the connection, and then your mom has her interpretation of the connection, and that the connection itself is different from either of your interpretations, then you get to invite the Lord to show you how to interpret this thing, which means you'll love her. That will be your response when you follow the Lord, okay? And I don't want us to think, I'm supposed to love this person, so I'm going to infuse love into my connection. You don't have control over that connection. Just like you don't have control over the stalk of corn that comes up from the ground. What you have control over is whether you planted it or not, whether you watered it or not, whether you blocked the sunlight from it or not. You have control over how it's affected. You don't have control over whether the corn comes up or not. You don't have control over what the corn looks like, how it tastes. You don't have control over that. The corn is going to come up according to what was sown. And you're giving one half of this connection. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, let's talk about opening and closing your... Is that a question? Yeah, it is actually. Can we get her a microphone? And would you stand up, please?
Beth, I'm just curious, like, when you are talking about this connection that happens between people, is that, you said you have control over whether you plant it, but it sounds to me like you're saying that that's a connection that God actually kind of plants.
Say that last bit. What do you mean?
It sounds to me like you're saying that in some ways you don't, like, I have a connection with this person in the room because we're in the room and I can see her and she can see me. And it's a minimal connection, but it's there,
okay.
Right?
Sure.
But I didn't make that connection. I just showed up here today. So who actually does the planting? If you see, I mean, I understand, like I understand, like I could plant seeds for a relationship to form, but I may never see her again. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm missing.
I think I'll give you, sure, you have a connection with every human being in this room. Sure, that's true. What I'm talking about in these examples, though, are when you have an intention.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because if we talk about your connection with everybody, like that's a totally different conversation going in a different direction. I want to talk to you guys about what you're moving toward, what you're saying yes to, what you're aware of. We'll start there, yeah? So this is going to be intention, right? Whether you like it or not, whether you want them in your life or not, there's a connection that's there. You're going to have a connection with a coworker, whether you want it to be there or not, right? Because you have an intention toward collaborating. I have to work with this person. I have to exchange with them. So a connection will be there regardless of whether I want it or not. The intention is move because of your job. You give it because you decided your job gets to dictate that you have a relationship with this person. You don't have to, but most of us do that because we need the money, right? Or whatever. All right. So opening and closing your spirit. There's a mechanic here where your spirit is open or it's closed. It happens all the time. It's not something you're supposed to learn how to do necessarily. It's something you're doing whether you want it to be happening or not. And a lot of you, in order to get stuff from me, you need to open your spirit to get that, right? And some of you aren't aware of it and your spirit's closed and you fall asleep. You're bored. You can't understand what I'm saying. And it's my fault for not teaching you. It's like, well, no, your spirit's closed. That's not my fault. You know what I mean? And that's just this example. This happens in all kinds of dynamics like this, where your spirit's either open or it's closed, and that determines what you're able to get, what you're able to receive, okay? And so, this is the closed version. This is the open version. Your spirit does either. This thing doesn't want to move. Am I supposed to do something different to get this clicker to work better? Okay. Opening your spirit allows spirit to come in and go out. So you're going to allow stuff to come into your being, to come out from you, when it's open or not. How many of you guys have ever had an experience where you're at a family something, a reunion, or you're at Thanksgiving or something, and then your dad doesn't say something that you thought he should have said in a moment, and then spirit closes? You're aware of that, yes? And then the way you express yourself from that point on is different. It doesn't mean you're not animated. It doesn't mean you don't say stuff, but it means what's coming from you is different. It's changed. Last night on the panel, Drew said that he was at Disneyland? Or somewhere with his friend, and for half an hour, his friend was like, what's up? What happened? You've been weird last whatever, right? His friend said something. I forget the story, but his friend didn't remember a certain moment they had, and so Drew closed his spirit. And his friend could feel the absence, the disconnect, right? So what I'm saying is, this is not a crazy concept that's only for certain people. We're opening and closing our spirits all the time. Question right over here. Microphone? Someone? Help me. Would you stand up, please?
So just to clarify, what you're saying sounds a little bit like disassociation. Does it feel like that? Like you're not really you've checked out, in other words.
Disassociation sounds extreme to me.
Okay.
I'm not going to say it's not relevant, or that's not an extreme version of this, but you can close your spirit and still stay engaged.
Okay.
I do it all the time.
Okay.
Meaning you don't have to emotionally shut down to close your spirit, but it means that whatever you are giving to them falls flat. There are times where I'm working with people on my team, and they're animated, they're expressive, they're even laughing, but what's coming out of them dies before it even hits me. I'm like, why am I bored right now?
Okay.
Why can't I connect to anything you're saying? And
Okay.
outwardly, they're super animated, but because their spirit's closed, I'm not getting anything from them, right? So they're not disassociated. That could be an extreme version, sure. So I'm not saying it's not under the umbrella of it, but it doesn't have to be disassociation in order for your spirit to be closed.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, right here. Go ahead.
Can you talk about closing your spirit is not necessarily a negative thing. I feel like all the examples you gave sounded negative, and then you said, I do that all the time. Can you explain like when you would do it and it actually be something to benefit your environment?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's a function, right? And I think in an ideal world, you shouldn't have to do this, but when stuff's happening that you don't want to be part of, that shouldn't be whatever, sometimes I close my spirit because I'm not in a space where I can respond to that well. So I'll pull back. The feeler thing, the discerner thing, I close my spirit often when I go places because I don't want to feel that stuff. And people like to come up to me and be like, oh, what are you feeling here? I'm like, nothing. I don't want to feel all that stuff all the time. I want to live my life. You know what I mean? I want to have a life. I want to be able to like enjoy the moment or whatever. And I'm not always in control of this, and I'm not doing it on purpose all the time, but by and large, often when I go to public spaces, I'm entering with my spirit closed because I don't want to feel all the crazy stuff that's going on in the room. And so I would like to propose to you that maturity in your feeler/discerner thing is not being able to feel everything. It's being able to not feel everything. Not because you can't or you shouldn't, but because you don't need to. It's great to have that capacity. That faculty being available to you is super helpful. And when you're intentional with it, you can open and so when I'm working with people, my spirit's open and I let their stuff hit me and it hurts. I'm like, oh, that's awful. Oh, that's dark. Oh, it's twisted in this specific way. But because of my sensitivity to that, I can then respond in an intentional way with the Lord to meet them where they're at and draw that thing out. Specifically, like surgeon-like almost, right? Because my spirit is open in that context. When I'm in a public space, I don't want to do that with all those people. I don't know those people. I'm not going to do anything with that stuff. So I don't need to be slimed by all of it. So my spirit's going to be closed. Okay? Yes. Will you stand up?
Hi, Mike. How do you open and close? Like, can you talk about how you do that?
No. I can't. I don't know how. Sorry. If I had better ideas for you, I would tell you. I'm not sure how to do it on purpose. I'm not conscious of how I do it on purpose. I know that there are times where I intentionally do it. I'm not sure what I'm doing. So the best I can give you is examples of when you see yourself doing it. And then the best I can tell you is pay attention to that. That's how you're doing it. I don't know how to explain to other people how to do what I do in my spirit. I don't have English for that. I'm sorry. I wish that I could. I'm not there yet. Yeah? Right over here?
Can you talk about your soul? Like, where's your soul? What's happening in your soul when you're shutting down your spirit? Do you shut that off as well, or is that still open?
I'm not shutting down my spirit. I'm closing it.
Closing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when you close your spirit, your soul's also not going to pick up a lot. You're not going to receive much from people. So if someone tells you they love you, and it's like a heartfelt moment for them, and your spirit is closed, you're probably not going to feel it. It's probably not going to hit you in a way that impacts you, right? There are lots of people walking around kind of closed off. They can't feel love. Super sad, right? It's so sad. It is, it's sad. If someone expresses pain and something that you've done that hurt them and your spirit is closed off to them, you're not sorry. You don't care. You might say you're sorry because you're polite or whatever, but you're not moved in the spirit, right? And so, yeah, if your spirit's closed, your soul's not going to feel the things that would provide inspiration. Does that answer your question? Okay. You guys. Okay, let's do one more right over here, and then we got to move on. I'm still on this topic. I haven't even taught yet. Why are you asking questions already? Go ahead.
It's really good, Mike. That's
Thank you.
why.
Yeah.
So when you're closed off in your spirit, are you still expressive in your emotions, or are you kind of more like closed
For
off?
me, when I'm closed off in my spirit, but I'm still emoting, I feel like I'm lying to people. I feel like I'm lying. Are you guys having trouble hearing me? Is it because this isn't loud enough? Or? What was that? It's echoey. Can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me? All right. Should I use the handheld? Has this been happening all morning? What? It's coming out of those. Okay, well, if I speak slower, does that help? Okay. So I said, if my spirit is closed and I emote, meaning I express what we interpret on the outside as emotion, I feel like I'm lying. It doesn't feel authentic because it's not coming from spirit. I'm just performing out here for the sake of the other person, but I'm not giving them me. You can feel that too. They can feel it too. Some people are more aware of it than others. Some people are not aware of it, which is bizarre to me. I'm like, wait, really? Like they can't tell, you know? But yeah, other people, most intuitive, more sensitive people can feel when you're just faking it, right? And so, did I answer your question? Sure. All right. Great. I feel like I'm getting a 40% on this. This is great. Okay, here are some occasions that I open my spirit intentionally in a public space. When I go to the movie theater, I cannot experience the story without opening my spirit, which is a very vulnerable experience. And those of you who see movie spirits in the theater, there's a whole commentary there. When I go to ceremonies like weddings or graduations or award ceremonies, I have to open my spirit to get to join the celebration, to enter into unity with the spirit of celebration for the moment, right? When I go to worship sets, you guys, when you're in the middle of a worship set, you have to open your spirit to receive and to give to the Lord in that space, right? If I go to an event like a concert or a conference or like a sporting event, you have to open your spirit to participate. And so last night with the example of men watching sports, their spirits have to open to join what's going on, but when they do, it's super fun. They are lifted up. When you see the crowds and they're cheering and whatever, it's a spiritual experience. People are lifting into something profound and unified, and they feel empowered, and they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, right? Anyway, so these are occasions where I know that I've observed, I open my spirit in this place, but then I also then pick up things I don't want to feel in public spaces, and it makes it a lot more of a thing. Yesterday, I don't know if I want to tell you this. Yesterday, I was aware, like probably about the third part of the evening, I was pushing off so much stuff that was coming in just from the event in general that if I sat down and stopped pushing, stopped maintaining my guard on it, I would just cry, just from all the emotions that I could feel, that weren't mine, that I'm fine, I run events, I'm not like, oh God, this is so hard. I didn't feel that way. But all this stuff coming at me debris-wise in the spirit, my spirit is closed because I don't want to have to be dragged down by all that stuff, but it takes energy to keep your spirit closed, especially when stuff's pushing against it. So in a strained relationship, when you keep your spirit closed to someone that you're supposed to be connected to, and they expect that from you and they keep pushing for it, that costs you energy to continue to resist, right? It drains your energy. It drains your physical stamina. Like, it's exhausting. And so there's a connection to that. Like I said, you guys, I'm breaking this down into compartments, but these three aspects of you are all one. Your soul, your spirit, your body, they all are interconnected. So you're going to get physically drained from spiritual resistance, which is so frustrating, right? Okay, anyway. You can feel when someone closes their spirit, right? We talked about that already. So when someone closes their spirit off to you, you can feel it. So for example, with Newman and others, there's the connection. The connection goes from this to this. It's not non-existent, you just can't feel it. What happened? Where'd you go?
I just had been told one way. I just had been told, like,
Okay, what is going on? Okay, so it goes from, oh, we're connected, this is happening, this is amazing, I know you, I know where you're at, I know what to expect, to all of a sudden, I'm in space. There's no oxygen. I'm floating. I can't push off anything. What's happening? What's going on? Right? And I've noticed, I'm not trying to be sexist here, but I've noticed women especially want to talk about everything immediately. I'm disconnected, I don't know where you're at, we need to talk about it. Because I feel like I'm out of control. I feel like I don't know where to go. I don't know what to push off of. I feel like I don't know what's happening. And usually I know. So where did you go? Right? Which I understand, I get that that's a high value. Ladies, I want to speak to you in a moment and say that's not a need. You don't need that. You're actually fine. The thing that's motivating you to have to get that to be okay is probably not the Lord. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you shouldn't value connection, that you shouldn't prioritize having it, but to not be able to function, to not be able to move forward, to not be able to continue to stay open and engaged without figuring out what happened there, I believe in better than that for you. And I've seen it as a pattern with many women. It just seems to be a thing. Like, they just feel like, well, I feel strong enough that I get to stop everything and say that we're not moving forward until we talk about this. I can't hear you. Yeah, give me that. I'm going to use this, Bailey. Hello? Hello? Can you guys hear me? Is this better? It is better. Really? Higher? Can we turn the volume up on this microphone? Is it not high enough? All right. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, you guys, I'm not saying don't get connection. Don't prioritize it. Don't look for that. But maybe don't come at it from such a frantic or fearful or like needy place. You're not needy. That's not true about you. And sometimes your like fear of not having this, you give into a certain persona or operation that's not awesome, that feels needy to other people. It's not fun because you're pulling on them, and so then they just label it as needy to be able to disconnect from it. But you don't have to have that as your portion. You can value connection and go after it, but you don't have to come at it from this black hole place. You're okay, I guess, right? I'd say something to men on the other side, but most men just don't know what's happening, so, or they're not aware of it, right? I'm just gonna go break stuff. I'm gonna go build something. I'm gonna go play video games or whatever. Because they have their version, right, of we just want to veg out and just like go to that nothing box, right, I guess is the thing. I don't have that, but I've heard men have that. All right, next. Maybe. Okay, when evil is presented, we go from this to this. So in a connection with someone, when they start partnering with evil in the relationship, your spirit will automatically close. You don't try to do it. It's almost like, if your body goes into shock and your system starts to do different things than you normally would, your spirit's doing the same thing. When evil shows up, if you don't have like a deep agreement with that spirit, you're going to close off from it because it's foreign, it doesn't belong here, it's unwanted, right? And you naturally are abhorring of evil. You don't want evil. So if someone introduces evil into the relationship, if they tell you something that sounds pleasant, but it's actually coming from like a manipulative place, your spirit's going to get weird. Something's wrong. And you a lot of us feel self-conscious, maybe even a little guilty for closing our spirit off from the person because we don't have a reason. I don't know why, I don't trust this person. I don't know why I don't trust you right now. I don't trust you over this subject, or I don't feel connected to you in this place, or whatever, right? When evil's introduced, our spirits close off. So I'm not saying it's always why your spirit's closing off, but as far as like being able to have a grid for why something might be happening in a connection, if your spirit closes off to somebody, it's possible it's because they've partnered with evil. If you partnered with evil, your spirit's not going to close because you're the one who said yes to it. It's the other member who's going to be like, well, So if someone closes off toward you and you're just not aware that maybe you did do something or partnered with something that wasn't awesome, you guys can have the conversation. And so why I have such a value on my team for us to have a confronting feedback culture. Sometimes we don't know that we said yes to something that we shouldn't have. And so we then also trust the other person to get to provide feedback and insight to help us see things we can't see ourselves. To be vulnerable in that place, you're going to need values for truth and for love and for the light. Like mutually. So I wouldn't advise doing this with someone who has no value for that stuff. But if you guys are building towards something and you both love the truth, you're both submissive to the Holy Spirit, then someone letting you know, like, hey, that kind of hit me weird, and you guys can reason together, that shouldn't be a terrifying prospect. We should be able to go there together, right? And get to work it out. But your spirit's naturally going to close if evil gets presented. Okay? Let's talk about disrupting atmospheres. So we go into Walmart, right? You're in Walmart. Let's say you're in Walmart with a friend. You guys are going through the cereal aisle together, and all of a sudden, Newman, let's say Newman's the feeler in this dynamic. All of a sudden, Newman's just like, he's holding the Captain Crunch, and he just like stops. And others is like, dude, what's up? What are you doing? Let's go. And Newman's like, yeah, I'll be there in a second. Really? Newman's grabbing the Captain Crunch, and others is like, hey, dude, what's up? And Newman's like, yeah, I'll be there in a second. Grabs the cereal, he's walking, and Newman's just kind of becoming conscious. I know some of us, that's not happening outwardly, but inwardly, you're like, what's happening to me, right? You start feeling like you're being sucked into the floor, like everything's wrong with the world, like you've lost control of yourself, like there are all kinds of feelings swirling about that you don't want to feel, and you don't know what they are, you just feel kind of overwhelmed and confused. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, and so Walmart just happens to be a popular site for this kind of an experience. And so let's say we're at Walmart and Newman's going into some weird place and Others isn't feeling any of that stuff. Others is fine. What I'd like to teach you guys to do here is not an alternative to trusting the Lord. If you can't find the Lord, I want you to understand you already have a connection in the spirit that you're vibing on in the moment. If you're alone, that's a different story, and we can talk about that dynamic. But let's say you go to Walmart with somebody, and they're not a feeler, and they're fine, and you're starting to like kind of do that spirally thing. I want you to remember that you have this connection thing going on. It's there, right? If it's someone that you're related to and you have value for, and there's an intention there, that connection is releasing power. There's energy coming from it, okay? So you're not the only person connected to the Lord. I'm assuming that Others is a believer as well in your context, right? And so that person is releasing stuff in the spirit you can connect to that will ground you from the swirly crazy, okay? So if that's happening to you, what you're going to have to do is rightly orient yourself to the connection you do have with the person you're with, which is probably hard to be aware of when you're like lifted off the ground and floating upside down and not sure what's going on, right? Which is that feeler experience. The people who are laughing know what I'm talking about. Gosh. And so if you catch yourself just kind of like Sandra Bullock in Gravity, and you're just like, no, in the cereal aisle, what I would encourage you to do as an option, I'm not saying this is the solution, I'm saying this is available to you. And everyone, raise your right hand. I want you to repeat after me. I promise I will not turn others into a resource. So that is not what this is, okay? You're not turning others into something that you use. It's not what I'm talking about. Intention is going to purify or dirty this thing, your intention, okay? So Newman knows that he's got a relationship with Others and has a value for him, and so as they're walking down this, exiting the cereal aisle, Newman might say something like, dude, I don't know what's going on, but I'm feeling kind of Sandra Bullocky right now. And Others is like, what do you mean? And Newman's like, I don't know, my emotions just shifted really strongly like 20 seconds ago. Is there anybody here who couldn't catch that's happening to them within 20 seconds? Like, it takes me way longer to notice. It's okay, I just want to know. Yeah. Nice and high, represent full, yeah. Okay, so those of you who it takes like a day or an hour or something way later to realize that happened to you at Walmart, I'm not talking to you right now. But what I do want to say to you is, if you continue to pay attention and invest in your process on this, you can crunch that timeline down to seconds. It doesn't have to be way later. I used to not know till hours later what was happening to me. Like, wait, something's wrong. It used to be normal. Out of practice, the wait time started becoming shorter and shorter to the point where now I can catch it the moment it happens, right? That's not because I'm so gifted. It's because I'm practiced. It's because I've done it enough. I've done it a lot, right? So those of you who it takes a while, to me that just says you're just not paying attention enough. Just keep paying attention. Keep asking questions. Keep knocking on that door. Keep digging. You'll reduce the wait time, okay? For those of you who are able to catch it within about a 20-second period, what I would advise you is just start talking about it with others. Basically expose the experience to the person you have a connection with. You're gonna kind of feed it into the line. I don't know what's going on. I'm feeling kind of crazy. I'm not sure what happened, but 20 seconds ago, my emotions started going nuts. On your end of this experience, you can set others up for success by giving them some specifics that you can nail this down to. So saying, I just feel crazy, oh my gosh, my emotions are off the charts, this place is like just out of control, there's so much chaos in here, not helpful for others, right? He's like, I don't know what to do with that. That means nothing to me. Oh, you're just having one of your episodes. It's not helpful. So I might say, hey, just so you know, something started happening about 20 seconds ago. I don't know what's going on. My emotions are just kind of all over the place at the moment. So I'm not checking out. I just need to figure out what's happening to me. Just stick with me here. I'm going to figure this out. And I'm not closed off. If you have questions, you're free to ask them. I just want you to know I'm not doing this because of you. Right? Just kind of inviting them into confessing what's happening. Right? And so others are like, okay. And anybody that has like relationship with you, after a while, they get this happens. And they're not like, yay, you're doing the thing again. But they understand. And they won't take it personally. for their sake, I would just pull others into the conversation so he doesn't start thinking I'm mad at him, right? Right? So you just kind of throw it out there. And then as you're going, you might have this moment where you're like, you know what? Like, let's say what you're feeling is making you feel like you want to give up, or like you don't want to be around anyone, or you want to run away, or you want to, all these negative ends. Usually we want to run into a black hole and disappear when this stuff's happening because we just don't want to feel it. We want to separate from the experience. Because of the connection I have with others, you guys, you can move in the opposite spirit of the thing, whatever it is, right? And so I might look to others and say, hey, dude, I just want to let you know, and I'm going to dip into something authentic about how I feel and what my connection is made out of toward others. Hey, others, I just want to take a moment and let you know, I'm so grateful you're in my life. Out of nowhere, which others will be like, thank you, right? That might be awkward. But I'd like to propose to you, I'd rather have an awkward conversation than spiral and be out of control for the next 20 minutes, right? And maybe it's not awkward, maybe it's fine. But I'd say something like, and maybe you can put it in a language that's less intense, but maybe something like, hey, others, I just want to let you know, you're a good friend, and I'm glad you're in my life. And he's like, well, that's so random, why are you saying that? Like, because I'm walking around in Walmart right now, and there's a lot of crazy stuff in this place, and you're a beacon of hope in my life. I love that you're here. I would just start putting language to how I actually feel toward this person and tapping into the connection that we have and speaking that out. Because as I do that, it actually aligns my focus and my awareness, and I start occupying my own soul with things that are good, pure, lovely, true, noble, right? Excellent, praiseworthy. I'm thinking on these things, and I'm directing them toward the person I'm with. And because there's a connection there, the connection itself is lending to my experience. I'm able to pull from the energy that's coming from that place to help me move what I'm being pressed by. Does that make sense what I'm saying? We are not using others, but there's a connection, independent of both of us, that is releasing spirit that I'm going to direct my intention toward. And as I do that, in the nature of our connection, it will help shift. It'll like give me a leverage to move things that if I try to do it by myself, I can't get there. It brings leverage. Yes, right here. Microphone?
I was just gonna ask, okay, so if others is not a feeler, well, what if the person that you're with is also a feeler, so you're both being sucked in? Can you still like, I would guess that you can still pull from your frequency if you're both intending it.
So remember, the connection is independent of the other person. So just because they're a feeler and getting sucked in the hole doesn't mean I can't pull on it and push toward them. Yeah, you can say like, hey, others, just want to let you know. Let's say in this scenario, others is a feeler too, and you're both like, you can direct your affection toward others and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm so glad that we're friends, that we're doing this together. I'm with you. You saying that with that intention will shift what's happening to you. And then guess what? Others has a lifeline that he may or may not take. You don't have control over that. He might not want to get out of it. He might just want to throw a fit. He might be like, thank you. You're right. Oh my God, we're fine. Right? That might happen. Either way, it'll shift you, but then it also probably will help others. And if he has any sense about him, he's going to grab that and move it too. Right? Okay. So we got to move on, you guys. Oh gosh, we don't have time. Okay, soul ties. Soul ties. The applause is making me nervous. Soul ties are good, can be bad, depending on what they're made out of, right? Depending on why we said yes. So we've got the connection. Oh, right? It's vibing. Oh, spirit's open. When you decide that this is a person, and you guys, I don't know how many of us are conscious of these moments in relationship, but there are moments where we're having an exchange, and all of a sudden something opens in the spirit, and you're like, this person matters to me. And maybe 5 seconds ago, they didn't matter to you like they do now, because you felt something open in your soul. Are you guys aware of that? When it happens, sometimes we realize it later. We're like, hey, I think this happened like 3 weeks ago. I didn't notice it, but all of a sudden I'm realizing I think this is a thing. Sometimes we notice in the moment. I'm about to fall off this stage. Sometimes we notice in the moment something happens, and I think they depict this in movies sometimes in a beautiful way. There's just the sun's hitting this person a certain way, and they say something, and this person's like, And usually there's music in the background. And they're like, oh, open, right? I'm not saying this is always the case, but often when that's happening, a soul tie is starting to form. There's something there, and you can say no to it, and you can disagree with it, and you can disrupt it. Or you can say yes to it, and you can move toward it, and you can allow your intention to continue to invest, and then that connection will establish, and you'll be bound in the soul. When you say yes to someone in this place, I think I put when our spirit is open in a relationship, the other person affects us on a more significant level than our other relationships, right? So when you say yes to someone in a soul tie scenario, or when you're like submitted to them in relationship, their choices are going to hit you in ways that other people's choices won't. When they make a flippant comment, it's going to hit you harder than some stranger yelling at you, right? Because you're susceptible to them, because your spirit is open, you're vulnerable. So in the soul tie arena, that's going to happen. If they make a poor choice, you are not, I'm going to put the word protected, you're not protected from their choice. You chose to be open to them in that area, which is a beautiful thing. It's beautiful, it's awesome, it's right and good until it's not. When you have sex with somebody, this happens. Your soul gets bound to theirs. You get knit, right? And so then you're susceptible to the stuff that they do and stuff they say and whatever. And that stuff passes over geographical space and time, right? You pick up emotion they're having when they're nowhere near you. Something to be mindful of, right? And so as that's happening, you want to be intentional and aware of who you're saying yes to in this place, in this way. Do you want to say yes to this? Is this a good thing? Is the Lord doing this? And if he is, you would be a fool not to say yes. Right? Because there are people that the Lord has allotted for your season. Sorry, that's the wrong way. Oh, I hate that I just said that. I'm striking that from the record. There are people the Lord has allotted for your life. He has brought them in and said yes to them. And as you say yes to them as well, he will cover that connection with grace and will empower you. And even the messes will be redemptive and empowering and cultivating intimacy in your heart with the Lord. As you're submitted to him and you continue to relate to that person in that heart, in that spirit, right? And so soul ties are powerful when we're saying yes to the Lord in the relationship. And the Lord does that. And we see like the soul of Jonathan being knit to the soul of David, right? It's something that's beautiful and right and good. That's supposed to happen. So I know that soul ties have gotten a bad rap, and we talk about them often like in inner healing and deliverance and stuff, and that's appropriate. But it's not always bad. Soul ties are good. I mean, I have several soul ties with people in my life, and I care about these people. And it allows me to be sensitive to what's happening in their world and what the Lord's doing with them. And I get to respond accordingly. And I get to partner with the Lord in contributing to their journey and getting to say things on his behalf. And some of that's not because of prophetic downloads. It's because of my soul tie and my relationship with the Holy Spirit. And I get to relate to them with him in that union. It's beautiful. I mean, you guys notice that the enemy is constantly after division, right? Trying to separate. And the Lord is constantly unifying, joining, bringing together, including. He's like that. And so in our relationships, there's probably an intimacy here that's probably just uncomfortable for many of us. Like, how can you have that with several people? What? I have that with one person, and it's not even that good, right? Or whatever. I think that it's like commonly an experience for a lot of people, but I think it's just because of a lack of experience in navigating these dynamics in the light, of learning how to follow the Holy Spirit and being submitted to someone even when they make mistakes, even when they choose things that aren't awesome. There are messes that happen, and there are instructions in Scripture on how we address that stuff. I might pick up some of this at our next session because we're running out of time, but we have an exercise I want us to do. Feelers will experience the introduction of evil as more intense and violating than the average person. So if you're a feeler and you're submitted to somebody, your spirit's open to them, and then they introduce evil to the connection, it's going to hit you in probably a dramatic and an intense way. Other people might just close their spirit off or not like it, but a feeler is going to be like, oh, what have you done? Right? And it's not because feelers are dramatic, it's because you're feeling it intensely, right? Which is a gift. But understand that if you open yourself to someone in this place and you're a feeler, that stuff's going to hit you hard. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It means be mindful and aware of what's happening and respond accordingly. Follow love, follow the truth. Okay? We got to skip this. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it the next session. Oh my gosh, change it, change it. Oh no, secrets are being revealed. Don't look. Oh my gosh, ingredients. No. Okay. No. Skip it. I can't skip it, you guys. I got it. Okay. We need to make an agreement here. You guys are about to partner up, but only one partner is going to get to do the exercise. The other partner is going to have to meet up with you later to do their part, if you want. But the reason we're doing that is because I'm going to pull one of you up, and we're going to do the exercise together in front of everyone. Okay? Is there a volunteer that's not on my team that wants to do this? Right here in the middle. Flower banner, let's go. Come on up. All right. What's your name? Do we have another microphone for Larissa? Can we give that? Yeah, great. All right, so Larissa, you're going to do it, and I'm going to be the guy like helping you with this exercise. All right, so I found you, and now I'm going to ask you about a relationship which you want the connection to change.
Let's think. Maybe my roommate.
This is sad because I'm skipping a part of what we were going to teach on. It's okay. Your roommate. Okay, what is it about the connection that you want to be different?
I'm gonna get more deeper, intimate with her.
Okay. Are there symptoms of evil in this connection?
No.
No, you just don't know her.
Misunderstanding, yeah, or like, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, like she
Actually,
works.
tell them.
Oh, hello. I guess we've only been roommates for maybe I think 6 weeks, but she kind of works whenever I'm home, or we kind of don't get to connect much and stuff in between and stuff. So, but it's like more of like a business relationship because I'm taking care of her dog. So I want it to be more like, intimate relationship and stuff. So.
Okay. Do you think she wants that?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now you can't have it because you guys just practically.
Yeah, like our schedules and other things. And
Okay.
Stuff,
So are there things in your mind readily that you can look at that you're like, oh, if this changed, this would be more realistic? Or does it feel like it's unattainable at the moment?
No, I think I could be more intentional with the relationship and pursue that.
Like, how would you do that?
Like intentionally planning her into my life, like setting up, specific time for that, or like.
Do you have time for that?
Yeah.
Does she?
Yeah.
Like this next week, for example?
Yeah.
When?
Wow. Let's say Tuesday night next week.
You have that open?
Yeah.
And so does she?
Yeah.
Okay, what would you do?
Probably just talk. She loves to talk, so probably.
Do you like talking?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, do you guys need to eat dinner together, or do you need to go like on a walk, or play a card game?
Yeah, any of that.
Is this like a
would be
deep,
great.
soulful, like dump my heart out conversation, or?
Yeah, I feel like she carries like a lot of wisdom, and I want to, build that bridge where it's not just professional interaction kind of deal, but.
Okay. So one thing that I'm going to throw in. That's interesting.
Feel free to say whatever. I'm not.
Well. One thing I'm going to
thinking.
throw in is just like
Yeah.
generally super helpful when it comes to wanting to pursue connection with somebody is if you can ask them a lot of questions, throw in whatever affirmation you genuinely do feel toward them or honor toward whatever they're bringing to the table, and then just follow curiosity. People genuinely want to share what they have, what they know, who they are. They love talking about themselves, right? And so I don't want to get her to talk about herself just for the sake of talking. I would like to have her share what she has to share from my curiosity, which then will establish a connection. If I just tell her, tell me about yourself, I hate that question. Tell me about yourself. Hate it. Why? Even if I give them whatever I give them, it's not based on connection. It's not going into something that will build. It won't last past this moment. There's no pursuit. There's no intentionality. There's no container for me to provide my things to sit in. So when people are like, tell me about yourself, I'm like, what else you got? Try again. And if they don't have any better, I'm like, yeah, this is probably not worth having. This conversation is probably not worth having. I'm not being harsh about that, and I wouldn't say it that flippantly, but that genuinely would be the intention. I've got people on my team, we're having a one-on-one, they're saying stuff, I'm like, ask me the question a different way, I'm working a little too hard on this. They have to like reorient, okay, what do they actually want? Because they don't bring pursuit to the conversation. And so even if I did answer them, it's not going anywhere. So what I'd throw there for you is, if you want to get to know this person and connect on a deeper level, make sure you're bringing pursuit and intentionality and invite her to answer questions that you've thought of that you want to know about her life.
Okay.
What do you do for work? What does that look like? Oh, what's your boss's name? Oh, what's that like? Oh, specifically details pursue. Specific questions. Don't just tell me about yourself.
Okay.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Okay. So this is kind of an interesting experience. I think we're going to do part of this tonight. We're going to jump back into these dynamics. We'll get into some of the mechanics on this, and then you guys, we're going to do the exercise. There's a segment we're going to do on the history of a connection, stuff that's happened for years now, and now it's like, what do I do with what I know? How do I re-engage that conversation, that relationship, and change the dynamic? We're going to talk about that. We didn't have time today. I'm not going to let you guys ask questions in the next section. I'm just kidding. But we'll get into that later, and then we'll do the exercise a little more thoroughly. We'll do the exercise tonight. I'm going to push it off till tonight. Are we good with that? Okay, so you guys, we're going to... Larissa, thank you. Okay, we're going to break for lunch. Oh, just kidding. We've got announcements. Do you want to... I'm going to pray, and then Danielle's got some announcements for us. So hold that thought. Holy Spirit, God, thank you for how fascinating the world we live in is. Thank you that we are profound. Thank you that we're so multifaceted and detailed. Yeah, God, thank you for grace and understanding how to navigate these dynamics, how to partner with you and produce life in our connections and our relationships. God, thank you for bringing things to the surface, for bringing clarity and understanding, for illuminating things in our hearts that we get to be conscious of and responsible with. We say yes to your fathering, your guidance, your ministry in this place. Yeah, we give you permission to lead us here, to show us things that maybe even we don't want to look at. If you think we're ready, God, we want to see it. So would you show us, and would you take us deeper into what it looks like to be mature and complete? In Jesus' name, amen.